At the end of October, the American First Army had been able to breach the infamous Siegfried Line at two places. Aachen was finally captured on the 21st of October 1944 after heavy fighting. The small village of Hürtgen at the edge of the large Hürtgen Forest had been reached as early as the 12th of September, but as the 9th Infantry Division pressed on, they were forced to fight in the dense and thickly wooded forest. In just 30 days, the division had suffered some 4,500 casualties for only little progress. But with the capture of Aachen, the First Army was spurred on continuing its success up north. Quickly new objectives were set up to exploit the capture of the city. The Americans of the First Army were to press on towards the Ruhr, which would serve as the jump-off point for the final drive on the River Rhine. 5th Corps was ordered to launch a minor flank operation, in which they were ordered to take the village of Schmidt and its nearby water dam. By the end of October 1944, the 28th Infantry Division, known as the Keystone Division, had taken over the line of the battered 9th Infantry Division, and they were ready to attack the village of Schmidt. In this series, we'll take a closer look at the campaign of the 28th Infantry Division in the Hürtgen Forest, starting off with the Battle of Vossenack. The 28th Infantry Division under Major General Norman Coulter consisted of 3 infantry regiments, the 109th, 110th and 112th, with each regiment having 3 battalions. Each of the regiments were given a set of objectives for the drive towards Schmidt. Several tank battalions had also been attached to the division, but the small creeks, dense woods and steep slopes were far from ideal tank terrain. The attack had been planned for the 31st of October 1944, but thanks to the mist, rain and bad visibility, it was postponed to the 2nd of November, in spite of the continuous bad weather. The 109th Infantry Regiment was to capture 2 objectives southwest of the town of Hurtgen, while the 110th Infantry Regiment was to capture 2 objectives around the Raffelsbrand area. Finally, the 112th Infantry Regiment and the Lieutenant Colonel Karl Petersen was the main driver of the operation, and they eventually had to capture Kommerscheid and Schmidt, the main objective. But before they could reach Schmidt, they had to take care of Vossenack first, in order to protect their left flank. Opposing the American 28th Infantry Division was the German 275th Infantry Division, which would later be reinforced by the famous 116th Windhund Panzer Division. In the centre of the line stood a village called Vossenack. The 2nd Battalion of the 112th Infantry Regiment had been given the task to clear it and set up a defensive perimeter on the hill to the east of the village. After a 60-minute-long bombardment, the men of the 2nd Battalion were to attack the village. 3 hours later, the 1st Battalion would start their attack towards Kommerscheid across the Karl Stream. When Kommerscheid was captured, it was up to the 3rd Battalion to seal the deal and capture the final objective, the town of Schmidt. 2 companies had been picked out to capture Vossenack. F Company would attack from the south and take the village for its record, while G Company would attack from the north. E Company would follow up and complete the mopping up of the town. In order to protect the southern flank of the attack, 1 platoon of F Company and 1 platoon of E Company would sweep across the open fields to the south of the village. In their attack on Vossenack, the 2nd Battalion of the 112th Infantry Regiment would be aided by Captain George West Jr.'s C Company of the 707th Tank Battalion, which was equipped with Sherman tanks. Both assaulting companies received 7 tanks. G Company received the 5 tanks of the 1st Platoon and 2 tanks of the 2nd Platoon. The 3 remaining tanks of the 2nd Platoon were to help F Company. The 3rd Tank Platoon would operate with E Company and help up with the mopping up of the town. On the 2nd of November, the day was misty and cold. At 8 AM, 1 hour before the 28th Infantry Division would start their attack, the artillery of 5th Corps and also a part of 7th Corps artillery rained down their shells on the German positions. At 9 AM, F and G companies of the 112th Infantry Regiment, aided by C Company 707th Tank Battalion, started to clear the outpost positions at Germeter and started their advance towards Vossenack. As soon as the infantry and tanks cleared the way leading north towards the village of Hürtgen, German artillery started to land among them, causing a few casualties. With the damaged church tower engulfed by the morning mist, the tanks proceeded towards their objectives. followed closely behind by the infantry. The American infantry followed to tank tracks in order not to step on any anti-personnel mine of the minefields they were advancing through. Gradually, small arms fire began to whiz past. On the left of the 112th Infantry Regiment's attack, G Company had deployed its 3 platoons. 3rd Platoon was on the left while 1st Platoon was on the right. The understrength 2nd Platoon followed up in support. The 7 tanks initially advanced in a line formation, firing 4 shots each at the church steeple. 2 gaps had been created in the minefield to facilitate the advance. Gradually, the tanks and infantry streamed through the gaps. The attack had only just begun when the driver of the lead tank on the left flank, the Sherman tank of Technical Sergeant Orney Brown, misread the markings and drove straight into the part of the minefield which hadn't been cleared. The tank evidently hit a mine blowing one of the tracks. Nonetheless, the 6 tanks proceeded. Some time later, 2nd Lieutenant William Quarry, the commander of the 1st Tank Platoon, became bogged down in the mud. The attack once again had to be halted. C Company's commander, Captain George West Jr., saw the advance being halted by the bogged down tank, and he immediately moved up with his own command tank, picking up 2nd Lieutenant Quarry, and he then moved to the right of the line. Despite the best of precautions, several casualties were taken amongst the infantry as a result of the mines. One of the men of the machine gun section of H Company, attached to the attacking G Company, trod on a mine setting off a chain reaction. Of the 27 men in his vicinity, 12 were wounded or killed. The machine gun platoon had to be reorganized, but they managed to continue their advance. As the advance progressed, both platoon commanders of 1st and 3rd Platoon of G Company became casualties. But the closer they got to Vossenack, the more Germans they could see fleeing to the north and south. The attack went quicker than planned, and by 10 AM, G Company had reached its objective, the high ground to the northeast of the village. The company started to reorganize and consolidated its new positions. 1st Platoon was put on the left and 3rd Platoon was put on the right, covering a street heading out of Vossenack. About 60 minutes later, 2nd Platoon also arrived on the scene, and they dug in to the left of 1st Platoon, completing a half circle. Because of the battalion's orders, G Company was forced to dig in on the exposed forward slope of the ridge, but despite their position, the company didn't face any more trouble for the rest of the day. While G Company was successfully attacking the northern part of Vossenack, F Company had also moved out at 9 AM with the 3 supporting tanks of 2nd Tank Platoon and a 1st Lieutenant James Leeming. 3rd Platoon of 1st Lieutenant Eugene Carlson was to sweep south and protect the right flank of F Company's advance in the village. 1st Platoon under 2nd Lieutenant John Wine carefully followed the 3rd Platoon until Carlson swung south. 1st Platoon then took over the advance along the main street heading towards the church. 2nd Platoon remained in Guermita as support. Apart from an odd mortar shell, virtually no resistance was met. At the crossroads between Guermita and Vossenack, the column headed south just as planned. The 3rd tank in the column, however, veered off too far south, and it was knocked out by a Panzerfaust fired from the edge of the forest to the south. 3rd Platoon and the 2 remaining tanks proceeded their attack towards the east, firing at everything that moved. After a couple of 100 meters, however, 1st Lieutenant Leeming's gun jammed, and so did the machine guns on board. After being left with only 1 operational Sherman tank, the attack to the south temporarily ground to a halt. 2nd Lieutenant Wine's 1st Platoon of F Company in the meantime had also reached the crossroads, but suddenly the platoon found itself fired upon by a few machine guns, and they had to endure heavy casualties. All but 3 men were either killed or wounded in the 1st squad. The platoon found itself pinned down until 2nd Lieutenant Wine personally led an assault to take out the Germans in the houses to their front. He threw a grenade inside, knocking out one of the machine guns. The pinned down infantry in the meantime rose up and charged the house. They overcame the German defenders, and they managed to take a handful of prisoners. After reorganizing his battered platoon, 2nd Lieutenant Wine proceeded the attack, and with relative ease made good progress within the town. During all this, the company commander, 1st Lieutenant Eldine Kaufman, was present, closely following the moves of 1st Platoon. While his platoon captured the majority of the village, 1st Lieutenant Kaufman received the information that his 2nd Platoon under 1st Lieutenant George Scott in reserve at Guermita was taking heavy German artillery fire. So Kaufman ordered them up to relative safety of Vossenack. While the 2nd Platoon was following up, F Company's 1st Platoon became bogged down again from small arms fire coming from a house just in front of the church. Under suppressing fire, a part of the platoon charged a house and rounded up 30 to 50 prisoners. The village of Vossenack was slowly getting into American hands. As the 2nd platoon arrived, 1st Lieutenant Kaufmann ordered it up to take over the fight from 1st platoon, which had become disorganized after their struggle for the Vossenack crossroads. This happened at around 10:30 am, when G Company to the northeast was already consolidating its positions. To the south, F Company's 3rd platoon was still awaiting tank reinforcements, but 2nd Lieutenant Novak had misunderstood the orders, and instead of moving forward himself, he sent out Staff Sergeant Paul Jenkins with another tank. With the arrival of the 2 new tanks, the advance continued. They suddenly found their route blocked with what they believed to be another minefield. They thus proceeded northwards through Vossenack itself. In order not to bring their tanks in peril, Staff Sergeant Jenkins led the tanks north along the routes taken by G Company an hour earlier. Together with 1st Lieutenant Carson's platoon, they completed the line to the right of G Company. In the meantime, 1st Lieutenant Scott and 2nd platoon of F Company advanced further into the village, past the church. A few houses beyond the crossroads, however, a group of Germans was causing trouble. As 1st Lieutenant Scott moved forward, he was hit by a burst of fire and was killed instantly. Scott's second in command was quick to take over, but he too was soon hit and wounded. The infantry was held up and the advance in the village had to be put on hold. By now, the rest of the 3rd Tank Platoon under 2nd Lieutenant Novak also moved up, with E Company behind them. But the Sherman tank proceeded too fast and they quickly reached 1st Lieutenant Kaufmann, who was still at the crossroads. Kaufmann ordered one of the tanks to fire a few rounds into the building, which was causing great casualties to 2nd Platoon. After pummeling the house with a few rounds, 1st Lieutenant Kaufmann personally charged the house. Inside they found 2 officers, of which one was wounded, and 7 other ranks. One of the officers was killed during the charge and the others were quick to surrender. Novak in the meantime headed south until his tank struck a mine and was immobilized. Nonetheless, Novak remained with his stationary tank, which had to act as a pillbox. As the attack to the east continued, Kaufmann was able to capture the members of the staff of the battalion tasked with the defense of Vossenack. One of the officers pointed out the few remaining defences, and he also noted that the village had been defended by 5 35-men strong companies, and that another had been placed in reserve to counterattack if necessary. The 1st platoon had in the meantime been reorganized and it was put in the assault role once again. With the 2 Sherman tanks of Novak's platoon, they continued their advance eastward. By 12:30 p.m. the rest of F Company had joined up with 3rd platoon and the men of G Company. Vossenack was captured with relative ease, although the 2 companies, especially F Company, had taken a few casualties. F Company quickly strengthened the defences. 2nd Platoon took over the positions of 3rd Platoon on the right flank of G Company. 1st Platoon on its turn continued the line on the right of 2nd Platoon in the north angle. 3rd Platoon was relocated to the extreme right flank of the defensive line of the 112th Infantry Regiment's 2nd Battalion. E Company of 1st Lieutenant James Connon also didn't come out of the battle completely unscathed. As G and F companies were preparing to launch their attack, Connon had assembled his men. He was tasked to mop up the town, and so he waited until all of G and F Company's men had gone forward. Because it took quite a while for the 2nd Platoon of F Company to move forward, E Company had suffered a few casualties by the artillery. Because Connon had ordered his men to assemble before the actual attack, his men had already cleared their trenches and foxholes and were thus more exposed to the German artillery fire. At 9:20 am, E Company's 1st Platoon under Staff Sergeant Edward Beck headed south. But after advancing for a few hundred meters, they were suddenly fired upon by a couple of machine guns from the forest to their front. Under the murderous fire, 1 man was killed and several were wounded, including Staff Sergeant Beck himself. A few stragglers turned back to Geometer and told 1st Lieutenant Connon what had happened. When Connon and the rest of E Company moved towards Vossenack, Sergeant Henry Bart returned to the pinned down platoon and took over the command. Bart had been given the orders to evacuate 1st Platoon, but because of the late-rating machine gun fire, this proved to be impossible. It was only after noon that the pressure on Bart's men slackened, as the 1st Battalion of the 112th Infantry Regiment had moved forward to attack. Sergeant Bart and Private First Class Wallace finally managed to push forward and eliminate the machine guns. Wallace returned to Geometer with a couple of prisoners, while Bart took the reduced platoon of 13 men to Vossenack. The mopping up operations of E Company went well, however, 1st Lieutenant West, the commanding officer of C Company 707th Tank Battalion, received the order to help E Company out in the mopping up. West headed back by taking the southern route until his tank also struck a mine. West's headquarter tank arrived shortly afterwards and West resumed command, helping out E Company where necessary. Within a few hours, Vossenack had been cleared of all German resistance. By 3:30 PM the mopping up was complete and E Company also took up defensive positions in the town. The infantry of the 3 companies of 2nd Battalion settled down and spent the remainder of the day improving the defences. During the day, 2nd Lieutenant Quarry's tank threw a track and it too was left immobilised. Several attempts to pull it out and repair the damaged tanks of C Company were in vain, and finally at 4 PM 1st Lieutenant West received the order to pull his tanks back to Germeter. With the left flank secured by noon on the 2nd of November, it was up to the 1st and 3rd Battalions to attack towards the main objective of Schmidt. For this, the 112th Infantry Regiment had planned for the 1st Battalion to start their attack at 12 noon on the 2nd of November. They were to move through the wooded slope to the south of Vossenack and proceed eastwards, where they would cross the Kaal River and take Kommerscheid on the other side of the Kaal Valley. Commanding the 1st Battalion was Major Robert Hazlitt. He ordered B Company under Captain Clifford Hackett to pass through A Company's defences at Richelskal and advance towards the wooded area to the south of Vossenack. Company C was to follow B Company in the advance. B Company was supported by 2 machine gun platoons of D Company. At 12 o'clock, without any preparatory shelling, 1st Battalion 112th Infantry Regiment started its attack. 1st Platoon of 1st Lieutenant Ralph Spalin was leading the company's attack. When they advanced for just under 400 meters, 1st Platoon started to take heavy fire from the wooded area to its front. 1st Lieutenant Spalin was immediately killed at the head of his platoon. The platoon went to ground and became pinned down under murderous fire coming from the entrenched Germans. Captain Hackett quickly sent up 3rd Platoon under 2nd Lieutenant Gerald Burrell to the aid of the pinned down 1st Platoon. Attempting to meet up with 1st Platoon, 2nd Lieutenant Burrell fell wounded with a broken leg. Nonetheless, he managed to drag himself to the safety of a shell hole, from where he was able to direct 81mm mortars on the Germans' positions. With their platoon commander in need of medical treatment and being under heavy fire, the advance of 3rd Platoon also stalled. At 1:30 PM, Captain Hackett was forced to commit his 2nd Platoon to the fight. Although 2nd Platoon got substantially further than the others, they too came under fire in the forest and were forced to consolidate their positions. Major Hazlitt later went to the regimental headquarters where he met up with Colonel Peterson. The orders initially stated for B Company to stay and hold their positions, but during the night Hazlitt pulled B Company back as they were too far forward. The main drive of the 28th Infantry Division had met with heavy resistance and were forced back to the start line of the day. There were mixed feelings at the regimental headquarters. While Vossenack on the left flank had been captured with relative ease, the main drive didn't manage to push through and was forced back to their starting line of the day. To the south, the 110th Infantry Regiment had also commenced its attack at 12 o'clock, the same time as 1st Battalion of the 112th Infantry Regiment. The 3rd Battalion of the 110th tried to advance towards Simonskal below in the valley, but they were quickly met by withering fire and no progress was made. The 2nd Battalion fared no better in their assault on a handful of pillboxes at Raffelsbrand. The 110th had the orders of capturing the Strauch-Schmidt road in order to facilitate the drive eastwards after Schmidt was taken. But their attack of the day had led to nothing but casualties. By the end of the day, the 110th Infantry Regiment was back where it started, with the 1st Battalion still in reserve. To the north of Vossenack, the 109th Infantry Regiment also set off at 9 AM together with the 2nd Battalion of the 112th Infantry Regiment. Their task was to secure a front line from where they could overlook the village of Hürtgen to the north. By 2 PM, 1st Battalion had 2 companies on their objective of the day. The 3rd Battalion, however, had run into difficulties as soon as they reached the Hurtgen-Germeter road. With all 3 companies in the front line, the 3rd Battalion was held up by a large minefield known as the Wilde Sau. The regiment's 2nd Battalion was moved up to the close reserve and to more importantly close the gap between the 1st and 3rd Battalion. Other than that, the 109th Infantry Regiment dug in and consolidated its new positions. For the Germans, the attack came a bit as a surprise. On the 2nd of November, Generalfeldmarschall Walter Model, the commander of Army Group B, had gathered together his staff officers, as well as several corps and divisional commanders under him. The reason for the meeting was for the various levels of the German command to study a potential American attack in the area of the Hürtgen Forest. Shortly after the meeting had begun, the telephone rang, informing them of actual American attacks in the area of Germeter and Hurtgen. The message also stated that the situation was critical and that reinforcements were desperately needed. Model ordered the officers directly involved to go straight back to their headquarters, while the rest would continue studying the map. As reports of the 28th Infantry Division's attack continued to come in, it was decided to commit a Kampfgruppe of the 116th Panzer Division, known as the Windhund Division, towards Hurtgen to deal with the penetrations made by the 109th Infantry Regiment. The rest of the 116th Panzer Division would follow later on. Because most of the divisional and corps commanders were present during the meeting, the preparations for the attack were drastically facilitated. The German counterattack was planned to strike at dawn the next day on the 3rd of November. The plan was to eliminate the northern penetration and sweep through in order to cut off the Americans inside Vossenack. It had been a day of success and defeat for the 28th Infantry Division of Major General Norman Cotter. On his left flank, the 109th Infantry Regiment had partially managed to secure its objectives. In the centre of his line, the 112th Infantry Regiment had managed to capture Vossenack, but the main drive of the operation had quickly ground to a halt. On his right flank, the 110th Infantry Regiment hadn't made progress at all during the day. With the new German counterattack hours away, the GIs of the 28th Infantry Division set in for the night and cautiously awaited what the next day would bring. This was the AceDestroyer. I hope you enjoyed the first part of the Hell in the Hurtgen series. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and do leave a comment down below. Cheers!